Ever heard of a real-life hobbit? I'm not talking about Middle-earth. I'm talking about a tiny species of human that once walked our planet. This is the incredible story of Homo Floresiensis, a discovery that turned our understanding of human evolution completely upside down. In 2003, a team of archaeologists made a discovery on the remote Indonesian island of Flores that would send shockwaves through the scientific world. While excavating a limestone cave called Liang Bua, they found something extraordinary, the partial skeleton of a female hominin. But this wasn't just any ancient human. She was tiny, standing only about 3.5 feet tall, with a skull the size of a grapefruit. The initial reaction from the global scientific community was a mix of disbelief and sheer astonishment. For decades, the prevailing view of human evolution was a neat, linear progression. Our ancestors were supposed to get taller, with bigger brains, eventually leading to us Homo sapiens. But this discovery, nicknamed the Hobbit, threw a giant wrench in that theory. Here was a small-bodied, small-brained human species that lived alongside our own ancestors just 50,000 years ago. It was a paleoanthropologic bombshell. How could this be? The key to understanding the Hobbit lies in its home, the island of Flores. For millions of years, Flores has been an isolated ecosystem, a natural laboratory for evolution. Getting there required crossing deep sea channels, a feat that would have been incredibly difficult for early hominins. This isolation created a unique environment where strange things can happen to animal life. One of the most famous phenomena on isolated islands is called island dwarfism. When large animals, like elephants, get stranded on an island with limited resources, they tend to evolve to become smaller over many generations. On Flores, archaeologists found fossils of pygmy elephants called stegodon. Conversely, small animals can experience island gigantism, evolving to be much larger than their mainland relatives. Flores was home to giant rats and huge marabou storks. So the leading theory is that Homo floresiensis is a product of island dwarfism. Their ancestors were likely a larger hominin species, possibly Homo erectus, who somehow made their way to Flores hundreds of thousands of years ago. Trapped on this isolated island with limited food, their population gradually shrank in size. Their bodies adapted to the environment, becoming smaller to survive on fewer calories. This process, known as insular dwarfism, had been observed in many animal species, but never before in humans. This discovery completely shattered the simple, linear model of human evolution that many of us learned in school. The idea that our family tree was a single, straight line leading directly to us was proven false. Instead, the discovery of the Hobbit painted a much more complex and fascinating picture. It showed that the human family tree was more like a bushy, branching plant, with many different species coexisting and adapting in unique ways all over the world. Our evolutionary past was not a neat march of progress, but a chaotic and beautiful tapestry of diversity. This brings us to the Hobbit paradox. For its tiny brain size comparable to that of a chimpanzee, Homo floresiensis displayed surprisingly complex behaviors. In the Liang Bua cave, alongside the Hobbit remains, archaeologists found sophisticated stone tools. These tools were used for hunting and butchering animals, including those pygmy stegodon elephants. Creating and using these tools requires planning, coordination, and intelligence that scientists previously thought was impossible for a creature with such a small brain. How could a human with a brain 1/3 the size of ours craft such advanced tools? This paradox challenges one of the most fundamental assumptions in paleoanthropology, that brain size directly equals intelligence. The Hobbit suggests that the internal organization of the brain might be more important than its sheer volume. Perhaps their brains were wired differently, allowing for complex thought in a compact package. It forces us to reconsider what it truly means to be human and intelligent. Of course, not everyone was convinced. The announcement of a new human species was met with fierce debate. Some prominent scientists argued that the Hobbit wasn't a separate species at all. They proposed that the skeleton belonged to a modern human, a Homo sapiens, who suffered from a medical condition that caused dwarfism and a small head, a condition known as microcephaly. This sparked one of the most intense and public disputes in the history of paleoanthropology. The debate raged for years. Scientists on both sides published papers, analyzed the bones, and argued their cases at conferences. The microcephaly hypothesis pointed to certain features of the skull that they claimed were consistent with the disorder. However, the team that discovered the Hobbit and many others stood firm. They pointed out that the skeleton's proportions, its long feet, Its wrist bone structure, its lack of a chin were unlike any modern human, sick or healthy. These were primitive traits more akin to much older hominins like Australopithecus. Over time, more evidence emerged that supported the new species theory. The discovery of more individuals, all small-statured, strengthened the case that this was a population, not just a single diseased individual. Detailed 3D scans of the skull's interior, creating a virtual endocast of the brain, showed that its structure was unique and not consistent with a downscaled Homo sapiens brain. It was its own thing, a brain that had evolved along a different path. While debate in science is healthy and never truly over, the consensus has now firmly shifted. Most scientists in the field now accept Homo floresiensis as a legitimate, distinct species of ancient human. So, what happened to these little people? The youngest Hobbit fossils are dated to around 50,000 years ago. This is roughly the same time that modern humans, our ancestors, are thought to have arrived in the region. Did our arrival spell their doom? It's a strong possibility. Throughout history, whenever Homo sapiens expanded into a new territory, other resident hominin species, like the Neanderthals in Europe, tended to disappear. Perhaps we outcompeted them for food and resources. Our larger bodies and potentially more advanced social structures might have given us a decisive edge. Or perhaps we brought new diseases that their isolated immune systems couldn't handle. It's also possible, though there's no direct evidence that there was direct conflict between the two species. We just don't know for sure. All we know is that after surviving on Flores for hundreds of thousands of years, the hobbits vanished from the fossil record shortly after we showed up. But here's a final tantalizing thought. The local folklore on Flores is filled with stories of small, hairy, human-like creatures known as the ebu-gogo. These tales, passed down through generations, describe little people who lived in caves, murmured in their own language, and would sometimes steal food from the villagers. These stories were told on the island long before the discovery of Homo floresiensis. Could these be the lingering cultural memories of our ancestors' encounters with the hobbits? Could Homo floresiensis have survived much longer than the fossil record suggests, living on in remote corners of the island, their existence preserved only in myth and legend? It's a fascinating and perhaps unprovable idea. The story of Homo floresiensis is a powerful reminder that our planet's history is full of surprises. It shows us that evolution doesn't follow a predictable path, and that our own family tree is more weird and wonderful than we ever imagined. The little Hobbit of Flores has had a huge impact, forcing us to ask new questions and rethink what we thought we knew about our own origins. Imagine shrinking down to just over 3 feet tall. Not as a child, but as a full-grown adult. This wasn't a fantasy for Homo floresiensis. The ancient human relative nicknamed the Hobbit. For tens of thousands of years, these tiny people thrived on the isolated Indonesian island of Flores. Their story is a powerful testament to evolution's incredible creativity, forcing us to rethink what it truly means to be human. How did they live? How did they survive? And what can their miniature world teach us about our own sprawling history? Let's journey back in time to the lost world of the hobbits. The key to understanding Homo floresiensis lies in a fascinating evolutionary phenomenon called island dwarfism. When a larger species gets stranded on an island with limited resources, less food, fewer places to roam, evolution often favors a smaller body size. Think about it. A smaller body requires less energy, fewer calories, and can survive on a leaner diet. For the ancestors of Homo floresiensis, who likely arrived on Flores as a larger species like Homo erectus, shrinking wasn't a weakness. It was a brilliant survival strategy. Over countless generations, natural selection whittled them down, sculpting a new kind of human perfectly adapted to its isolated, resource-scarce home. Every inch of their small stature was an evolutionary advantage, a direct response to the pressures of their environment. This wasn't a step backward. It was a giant leap in efficiency. So, what did this pint-sized body mean for their daily lives? Their small frame, weighing only about 55 pounds, was an engine of efficiency. Unlike us, who need thousands of calories a day, a hobbit could likely get by on a fraction of that. This was crucial on an island where every meal was earned. Their short legs and unique foot structure suggest they walk differently than we do, perhaps not as adapted for long-distance running, but perfectly suited for navigating the dense forests and rugged terrain of Flores. Their small size also made them less of a target for the island's predators, like the giant marabou storks. and allowed them to exploit smaller shelters and food sources that a larger human might ignore. Their entire physical being was a masterclass in adaptation, a body built not for conquering continents, but for mastering a single unique island world. Now, you might think that a smaller body and a brain about a third the size of ours would mean primitive tools and simple behaviors. But that's where the story gets truly amazing. Archaeologists digging in the Liangbua cave on Flores found sophisticated stone tools right alongside the Hobbit fossils. These weren't just crude choppers. They were well-crafted points, blades, and perforators, tools that required planning, skill, and a deep understanding of materials. The evidence is clear. Homo Floresiensis were skilled toolmakers. And what did they use these tools for? Hunting. The bones of pygmy elephants called stegodon, Komodo dragons, and giant rats were found butchered in the same cave layers. This wasn't scavenging. This was active, coordinated hunting of animals much larger than themselves. Imagine a group of 3-foot-tall hunters bringing down an elephant, even a small one. It would have required intelligence, communication, and immense courage. The life of a hobbit was defined by constant pressure and the need to be flexible. Flores was no tropical paradise. It was a dynamic environment with active volcanoes, unpredictable weather, and a unique cast of predators and prey. To survive, Homo Floresiensis had to be incredibly adaptable. They weren't just hunting big game. They were likely foraging for plants, catching smaller animals, and exploiting whatever the environment offered. This behavioral flexibility is a hallmark of intelligence. They couldn't rely on brute strength, so they had to rely on their wits. Their ability to thrive for so long, we read talking over 100,000 years in such a challenging and isolated setting, shows that they were not just surviving but succeeding. They were masters of their domain, constantly innovating and adjusting their strategies to meet the demands of their island home. Their story is a powerful reminder that there isn't just one way to be a successful human. And this brings us to the most profound lesson from the hobbits of Flores. For a long time, we've held a simple belief: bigger brain equals more intelligence. Homo sapiens, with our massive craniums, sat at the top of the intellectual pyramid. Homo Floresiensis shatters that assumption. With a brain the size of a chimpanzee's, they crafted complex tools, organized group hunts, and controlled fire. This forces us to ask a difficult question: what is intelligence? Maybe it's not about the sheer size of the brain, but about how it's wired. Perhaps the hobbit brain was incredibly dense and efficient, packing a lot of cognitive power into a small package. Their existence proves that the link between brain volume and complex behavior is far more nuanced than we ever imagined. They show us that evolutionary success can come in small packages, and that intelligence can manifest in ways we are only just beginning to understand. The hobbits weren't a failed experiment or a dead-end branch of the human tree. They were a different kind of success story, one that challenges our most fundamental ideas about our own evolution. The world of Homo Floresiensis eventually came to an end. They disappear from the fossil record around 50,000 years ago, around the same time that modern humans, our own ancestors, are thought to have arrived in the region. Did we outcompete them? Did we bring diseases they couldn't handle? Or did a massive volcanic eruption, a common event on Flores, finally seal their fate? We may never know for sure, but their legacy endures. The hobbits of Flores were a testament to the incredible diversity of the human family. They remind us that our evolutionary path was not a straight line, but a branching, beautiful, and often surprising tree. They were small, but their impact on our understanding of what it means to be human is gigantic. Imagine stepping back in time, not just thousands, but tens of thousands of years, to a remote island shrouded in mist and mystery. This is Flores, a land once walked by a truly unique human relative, Homo Floresiensis, affectionately nicknamed the Hobbit. For decades, their story was locked away in stone and bone, a puzzle waiting to be solved. Today, we're going to piece together that puzzle, revealing the surprisingly complex world of these small-statured people. The story begins in Liangbua Cave, a cavern that served as a home, a workshop, and a final resting place for the hobbits. When archaeologists first unearthed their remains alongside a collection of stone tools, it was a revelation. These weren't just crude choppers. They were carefully crafted points, blades, and flakes. Each artifact is a clue, a whisper from the past telling us about their daily lives. By studying how these tools were made and what they were used for, we can start to reconstruct their culture, not just as a species, but as a society. Think about it, what does it take to create a tool? You need to select the right kind of rock, understand its properties, and have a clear plan for what you want to make. This requires foresight, skill, and knowledge passed down through generations. The tools found on Flores show a consistent style and technique over a vast period. This consistency suggests a stable cultural tradition, a shared way of doing things that connected individuals across time. It's the first hint that these small-brained hominins were far more sophisticated than anyone initially believed. These stones aren't just rocks. They're the tangible remnants of a lost culture. So, what were they doing with these sharp stone tools? The answer lies in the other bones found in the cave, the remains of their meals. The evidence points to a diet that was both diverse and daring. The most dramatic finds are the bones of a dwarf species of elephant called stegodon. These animals, though smaller than their mainland cousins, were still several times the size of a hobbit. Hunting one would not have been a simple task. It would have required incredible bravery, strategic planning, and most importantly, teamwork. This wasn't a solo endeavor. Imagine a group of hobbits armed with stone-tipped spears, coordinating their movements, anticipating the stegodon's actions, and working together to bring it down. This level of cooperation paints a vivid picture of their social structure. They weren't just a random collection of individuals. They were a coordinated hunting party, a community that relied on each other for survival. The butchery marks left on the stegodon bones show that they skillfully carved up the carcass, sharing the meat among the group. This is social behavior in action, frozen in time, but their diet wasn't limited to giant prey. They also hunted giant rats, birds, and lizards, and likely foraged for plants, roots, and fruits. This varied diet shows a deep understanding of their environment. They knew where to find food, how to get it, and how to process it. This adaptability was key to their long survival on the island, which spanned over 100,000 years. Their food strategy wasn't just about sustenance. It was a cornerstone of their social and cognitive world. The ability to hunt large animals like stegodon implies more than just physical courage. It points to advanced cognitive abilities. To succeed, they must have been able to communicate complex ideas. You circle from the left. Wait for my signal. Aim for the legs. While we don't know what their language sounded like, the archaeological evidence for coordinated hunting strongly suggests they had one. Communication is the glue that holds a cooperative society together, allowing for planning, teaching, and the sharing of knowledge. Furthermore, the very act of toolmaking, or napping, is a cognitive exercise. It involves a sequence of steps, problem-solving, and a mental template of the final product. Researchers have even tried to replicate the hobbit's tools, discovering that it requires a significant amount of practice and skill. The cognitive demands of making these tools, combined with the strategic thinking needed for hunting, challenge the old idea that brain size directly equals intelligence. Homo Floresiensis proves that a small brain could house a surprisingly sharp mind. They were problem solvers, innovators, and social beings, all packed into a tiny frame. Now let's add another layer to their world: fire. Deep within Leanbua Cave, archaeologists found hearths-charred patches of earth and burnt animal bones. This is unmistakable evidence that the hobbits controlled and used fire. Fire is a game-changer for any society. It provides warmth in a cool, damp cave, offers protection from predators that might lurk in the dark, and most importantly, it transforms food. Cooking meat and plants not only makes them easier to chew and digest, but also unlocks more nutrients. This boost in energy could have been crucial for fueling their bodies and brains. But the impact of fire goes far beyond nutrition. Picture the scene. As dusk falls over the island, the community gathers around the flickering flames of the central hearth. The fire becomes the heart of their social life. It's a place to share food, to mend tools, to tell stories, and to strengthen social bonds. The communal fire would have extended their day, creating more time for social interaction after the sun went down. In the warm glow, elders could pass on hunting techniques to the young, stories could be shared, and plans for the next day's hunt could be made. This daily ritual of gathering around the fire would have reinforced their sense of community and shared identity. It turned a dark cave into a true home, a sanctuary of light and warmth. The discovery of fire use adds a deeply human dimension to the story of the hobbits. Our journey through the world of Homo Floresiensis doesn't end with archaeology. It takes a fascinating turn when we listen to the stories of the people who live on Flores today. The local Nage people have a rich oral tradition filled with tales of strange and mythical creatures. One of the most intriguing figures in their folklore is the ebu-gogo. According to the legends, the ebu-gogo were small, hairy, human-like beings who lived in caves. The stories describe them as walking with an awkward gait, murmuring in their own language, and sometimes stealing food from the villagers. For a long time, these were just considered myths. But when the discovery of Homo Floresiensis was announced, the parallels were astonishing. Could the ebu-gogo legends be a distant, distorted memory of actual encounters between modern humans and the hobbits? It's a tantalizing possibility. We know that modern humans arrived on Flores around the same time that the hobbits disappeared. It's highly likely that the two groups coexisted, perhaps for thousands of years. The Nage stories could be a form of cultural memory, a folk echo of a time when another kind of human walked the island. Of course, we can't prove a direct link, but the similarities are too striking to ignore. It suggests that the hobbits may not have just vanished without a trace. They may have lived on, not in body, but in the stories and myths of the people who came after them. This potential link between paleontology and folklore is a powerful reminder that the past is never truly gone. The stories told around fires today might just hold the key to understanding encounters that happened tens of thousands of years ago. From stone tools to coordinated hunts, from the warmth of a communal fire to the echoes in modern folklore. The story of Homo Floresiensis is a testament to the resilience and complexity of our ancient relatives. They were not simple, brutish creatures, but an intelligent and resourceful people who carved out a life on a challenging island for over 100,000 years. They built a culture, formed a society, and may have even left their mark on the myths of modern humans. The hobbits of Flores teach us a valuable lesson: never underestimate our ancestors, no matter how small. Their story, written in stone and bone, continues to unfold, and with each new discovery, we get a little closer to understanding this incredible chapter in the human story. Imagine an island, lost in time, where a different kind of human walked the earth, long after their relatives had vanished. This isn't a fantasy novel. This is the story of Homo Floresiensis, the real-life hobbits of our human family tree, and one of prehistory's most enduring mysteries. For hundreds of thousands of years, while species like Neanderthals and Denisovans rose and fell across Eurasia, this tiny hominin thrived in total isolation on the Indonesian island of Flores. Think about that for a second. While massive mammoths roamed the cold steppes and our own ancestors were just beginning to spread out of Africa, a population of humans, standing just over a meter tall, had already mastered their own corner of the world. Their longevity is absolutely astounding. Most hominin species last for a few 100,000 years at best. Homo floresiensis was around from perhaps as early as 700,000 years ago until as recently as 50,000 years ago. They weren't just a brief chapter in the human story. They were an entire volume, so how did they pull it off? The secret to their incredible survival story lies in their isolation. Flores was their fortress. Getting there required a sea crossing, a barrier that kept them safe from the predators and competitors of the mainland. On this island, a fascinating evolutionary process called insular dwarfism took hold. When large animals get trapped on an island with limited resources, they tend to shrink over generations. We see this with the island's pygmy elephants, the stegodons, which were a key food source for Homo floresiensis. It seems the same happened to their human ancestors, who likely arrived on the island as a larger species, perhaps Homo erectus, and gradually adapted to their new, smaller world. This isolation was a double-edged sword. It protected them, yes, but it also made them incredibly specialized. They weren't just small. Their brains were tiny, about the size of a chimpanzee's, yet the stone tools they created were surprisingly sophisticated. This challenges our long-held belief that big brains are a prerequisite for complex behavior. They were perfectly adapted to hunt the unique fauna of Flores, navigate its dense jungles, and survive its challenges. For millennia, their world was stable, a self-contained ecosystem where they were the apex intelligence. But no paradise lasts forever. The very thing that protected them, their isolation, also made them vulnerable. Their entire world was confined to one island. Any major environmental shift could spell disaster. Flores is in a geologically active region. A single massive volcanic eruption, a super-eruption of the kind we know happened in Indonesia, could have blanketed the island in ash, wiped out their food sources, and poisoned their water. Evidence suggests that the island's unique fauna, including the pygmy stegodons, vanished around the same time as the hobbits. It's a stark reminder of how fragile even a long-established existence can be. A change in climate leading to a shift in the rainforest ecosystem could have had the same devastating effect. When your entire species lives in one small place, you're betting everything on that place remaining stable. And then a new player entered the game. Around 60,000 to 50,000 years ago, a new kind of human arrived in Southeast Asia, one that was taller, had a much larger brain, and possessed an unprecedented ability to adapt and innovate. Our own species, Homo sapiens. We were the ultimate generalists, spreading across the globe and mastering every environment we encountered. Unlike Homo Floresiensis, we weren't confined to a single island. We were a global phenomenon. The arrival of modern humans on the scene marks the final, and perhaps most debated, chapter in the Hobbit story. Did we ever meet them? The timing is tantalizingly close. The last evidence for Homo Floresiensis dates to about 50,000 years ago, precisely when modern humans are thought to have been colonizing the region. It's the ultimate prehistoric cliffhanger. Did our ancestors step ashore on Flores and find themselves face to face with another kind of human? There are a few compelling hypotheses. One possibility is direct competition. Even if our ancestors didn't actively hunt them, we were incredibly efficient. We would have competed for the same resources, the same animals, the same plants, the same caves for shelter. With our advanced toolkits and social structures, we may have simply outcompeted the hobbits, gradually squeezing them out of their ecological niche until they could no longer survive. It might not have been a violent conflict, but a slow, inexorable replacement. Another, more dramatic theory is that there was direct conflict. Throughout history, encounters between different human groups have often been fraught with violence. It's not hard to imagine our ancestors viewing these small people as something other, something alien, and reacting with hostility. However, there is no direct archaeological evidence like a hobbit skeleton with spear wounds to support this idea. It remains pure speculation. There's also the possibility that we brought diseases. When isolated populations encounter outsiders, they are often devastated by pathogens to which they have no immunity. The arrival of Homo sapiens could have introduced a common cold or flu-like virus that, while minor for us, was a deadly plague for the immunologically naive hobbits. Of course, it's also possible that we never met them at all. Perhaps the hobbits were already gone by the time our ancestors made landfall on Flores. Maybe a volcanic eruption or some other environmental catastrophe had already sealed their fate just a few centuries or millennia before we showed up. The timing is so tight that it's impossible to be certain without more evidence. The legacy of Homo Floresiensis is profound. They show us that the path of human evolution wasn't a straight line leading inevitably to us. It was a messy, branching tree with many different ways of being human. They were a successful, long-lasting species that proves you don't need a big brain or a big body to be a sophisticated toolmaker and a successful survivor. They are a testament to the incredible adaptability of our ancestors and a poignant reminder of a world that was once far more diverse, a world we shared with other kinds of people. The lost world of Flores may be gone, but the questions it raises about our own origins, our identity, and our place in the natural world will continue to fascinate us for years to come. In 2003, on the remote Indonesian island of Flores, scientists unearthed a discovery that would rewrite the story of human evolution. In the cool, damp earth of Liang Bua Cave, they found the partial skeleton of a tiny ancient human. Nicknamed the Hobbit, this individual stood just over a meter tall. This wasn't a modern human with a growth disorder. This was a member of an entirely new species, Homo Floresiensis. For thousands of years, while Homo sapiens were painting caves in Europe and hunting mammoths across Asia, this miniature relative of ours was living a separate existence, using stone tools to hunt pygmy elephants and giant rats. The initial dating suggested they might have survived until as recently as 12,000 years ago, meaning they could have shared the island with modern humans for tens of thousands of years. Imagine that a world where we were not the only humans. But this raises a profound question. What happened to the hobbits? Did we, the newcomers, simply outcompete them, driving them into extinction like so many other species? Or is the story more complex, more intimate, and perhaps even more haunting? Today we're diving deep into the mystery of Homo Floresiensis. Was it a simple case of extinction, a story of absorption into our own gene pool? Or could they live on, transformed into myth and legend? Let's explore the ghosts of Flores. The most straightforward theory, and the one many scientists initially lean towards, is competitive extinction. It's a story we've seen play out time and again. A new, adaptable species, in this case Homo sapiens, arrives in an established ecosystem. With more advanced tools, different social structures, or perhaps just greater numbers, the newcomers monopolize resources. The native species, unable to compete, slowly dwindles and disappears. Think about it from the perspective of our ancestors arriving on Flores. They would have encountered a world completely alien to them, but they had the cognitive toolkit that had already allowed them to conquer continents. Homo Floresiensis, with a brain about a third the size of ours, might have been perfectly adapted to their island home for millennia, but they were no match for the new neighbors. It's a grim but familiar tale in the saga of life on Earth. The arrival of modern humans often coincides with the disappearance of large fauna, and perhaps other hominins were no exception. But hold on, updated dating of the Liang Bua cave site has pushed the last known evidence of the hobbits back to around 50,000 years ago. This is suspiciously close to the time modern humans are thought to have first arrived in the region. The timing is just too coincidental to ignore. Did we hunt them? Did we simply take all the best food and territory, leaving them to starve? Or did we bring diseases that their isolated immune systems had no defense against? Any of these scenarios would fit the classic extinction model. It's a clean, albeit tragic, explanation. But what if the end of the hobbits wasn't an end at all, but a transformation? This brings us to a far more intriguing possibility: absorption. What if the hobbits didn't just vanish? What if they became part of us? We know from our own DNA that our ancestors didn't just replace other hominins like Neanderthals and Denisovans, they interbred with them. Many people of European and Asian descent carry a small percentage of Neanderthal DNA. People from Melanesia and Southeast Asia often have Denisovan DNA. This interbreeding wasn't a rare, one-off event. It was a significant part of our species' journey. So, why not the hobbits? Could Homo sapiens arriving on Flores have seen these small people not just as competitors but as potential mates? If interbreeding occurred, the Homo Floresiensis gene pool would have been gradually diluted and absorbed into the much larger modern human population. Over generations, their distinct physical traits would fade away, leaving only faint genetic echoes in the local population. The problem? We don't have the proof. Yet, extracting DNA from ancient remains in tropical climates is incredibly difficult. The heat and humidity degrade genetic material rapidly. So far, all attempts to get a hobbit genome have failed. But the absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. Scientists are still trying, using new and more powerful techniques. If they succeed, and if they find Floresiensis DNA in modern populations on Flores or surrounding islands, it would completely change our understanding of their fate. They wouldn't be extinct. They would be ancestors. Their story would be woven into the very fabric of the people living there today. It's a much less lonely version of our past, suggesting that when different kinds of humans met, the outcome wasn't always war sometimes, it was love. Now let's step out of the laboratory and into the realm of human memory, into the stories and folklore of the people who live on Flores today. For centuries, the local Leo people have passed down tales of the Ebu-Gogo. The name translates to something like grandmother who eats anything. These beings are described as small, hairy, human-like creatures, about a meter tall, who walked with a slightly clumsy gait. They are said to have murmured to each other in their own language and would sometimes steal food from human villages. The descriptions are astonishingly similar to the scientific reconstructions of Homo Floresiensis. The folklore even details the last encounter with them. The stories say that the Ebu-Gogo were tolerated until they stole a human baby, after which the villagers drove them into their cave and sealed the entrance with fire, wiping them out. Other versions of the story are less violent, suggesting they simply retreated deeper into the forests and were never seen again. Could these be literal, preserved memories of encounters with the hobbits? It's a tantalizing idea. Anthropologists are often skeptical of using folklore as direct historical evidence. Stories change over time, and mythical creatures are a part of every culture. Yet the parallels are too specific to dismiss entirely. Could the Ebu-Gogo be a cultural memory of another kind of person who shared their world? If so, it would mean that Homo Floresiensis survived far longer than the 50,000-year-old bones suggest, living alongside modern humans for millennia, long enough to become embedded in their deepest cultural traditions. This theory suggests the hobbits didn't just vanish physically. They were transformed into figures of myth, their existence preserved not in stone, But in story, they became a ghost in the collective memory of Flores. So what does this all mean for how we think about human evolution? The story of the Hobbit forces us to reframe the very idea of extinction. We often imagine evolution as a clean, linear progression, with less advanced species being replaced by more advanced ones. Homo erectus gives way to Neanderthals, who give way to us. It's a ladder, and we're at the top. But the reality, as Flores shows us, was much messier and more interesting. For most of human history, the world was a patchwork of different human species. It was a multi-hominin planet. The idea that we are the sole inheritors of the Earth is a very recent phenomenon. The disappearance of other hominins might not always have been a simple case of one species dying out. If interbreeding was common, then perhaps extinction isn't the right word. Maybe merger or assimilation is more accurate for some groups. The discovery of Homo Floresiensis proved that our family tree has more strange and wonderful branches than we ever imagined. It reminds us that our own path to dominance wasn't guaranteed. For thousands of years, our species was just one of many kinds of people. The Hobbits challenge our sense of uniqueness and force us to ask, what other human stories have been lost to time? How many other worlds like the one on Flores existed, with their own unique human dramas playing out in isolation? It encourages a more humble and more awe-inspired view of our place in the grand evolutionary story. So what really happened to the Hobbits of Flores? Did our ancestors drive them to extinction in a classic struggle for survival? Did we embrace them, absorbing their genes into our own lineage until they disappeared as a distinct people? Or do they live on as the Ebu-Gogo spectral figures in the folklore of the island, a haunting cultural memory of a time when we were not alone? Maybe the answer is a combination of all three. Perhaps some populations were outcompeted while others interbred, and their final lingering presence inspired the legends. For now, the fate of Homo Floresiensis remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in anthropology. They are a powerful symbol of the incredible diversity of our evolutionary past, a reminder that the story of humanity is far richer and more complex than we ever knew. Their tiny bones ask us big questions about what it means to be human and what it means to be gone. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey to the island of Flores. If you found this mystery as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into our incredible past. What do you think happened to the hobbits? Let me know your theory in the comments below. See you next time.